Hey, if you're here, you're probably planning to do this job on your own car. This tutorial shows how you can do the job by modifying original Mercedes parts, but I also make and sell these billet aluminum fittings designed as a permanent solution for peace of mind. The best way to support me is by buying a set, link in the video description below. To start this project, you should budget out about a day's worth of time and get the car prepped by getting the front up on jack stands, removing the front and center underbody skid plates, and draining the coolant. So before I get too far into disassembly, I'm going to briefly cover the two types of coolant line layouts found on these engines. So there are two types. The first type being this one shown here with nothing up in this cavity between the air boxes, and the second type being this layout here with the extra intercooler reservoir. The first type is more commonly found on earlier models like the 2012s and 2013 model years, and it has this kind of layout here where you have your driver's side lines on two elbows, one here, and then you have a straight fitting that goes into this passenger side line through a 90-degree little piece of plastic tubing. And on your driver's side, you'll have these lines, which are the ones that you'll be doing the cutting on to replace these. If you're ordering these replacement fittings from me, you'll need the kit 1 shown here with these 3 lines. The second layout keeps one of the elbows on the driver's side here, but replaces this. So on the second type, these two ports will be blocked off in the water pump, and you'll have this fitting that goes over them like this. You'll have your other driver side line here, and then instead of having that directly in the water pump, it'll move out onto the top of this. And then here, you'll have this split block fitting that has a 90-degree line that comes up a little, then into here. If your car has this type and you're looking to replace it with my fittings, this is the kit you'll need, and this will come with the pre-molded hose. Part numbers can be found down in the description if you're looking to just replace these with OEM fittings. First, you'll want to remove your engine cover, center as well as driver side small cover. Next, you'll want to remove your intake ducts. They should just snap right off, but be careful because these are delicate. Then you'll want to take a 9/32 or a flathead to this clamp that holds the boot to the airbox on the driver's side only. Disconnect that, lift up here and here, and you should feel it give, and the rear corner should do the same. You want to move it away from the vacuum line to your brake booster and disconnect. There should be a connector back here that you'll want to pry and disconnect. Then the whole airbox should come out. This may not seem necessary at the moment, but it makes reassembly of the charge pipe, of the intake pipe much easier. Next, you'll want to remove the driver's side intake pipe. And first you'll undo this bolt right here that holds the bracket onto the engine block. And then using the same 9/32 bit, you want to undo this hose clamp that holds the boot to your intake pipe and just slide that off. Careful not to disconnect the PCV valve, PCV vent line. It's okay if you do, just put it back. Next, this is one of the more difficult to reach bolts. You'll want an extension on your 9/32 or flathead, and you'll want to reach down and undo the hose clamp where it enters the turbo. Once it's been loosened, you want to take the intake pipe and just wiggle it, and you should feel a little bit of resistance down where the clamp is that you just undid, and it should come off. You should be able to snake that out of there. Now's a good chance to give this a nice cleaning. After that, you'll want to do the same with your charge pipe. It should be one clamp here and one clamp here. Same 30 seconds. An extension or a U-joint will help you access these. After that, there's going to be one bolt that is underneath the charge pipe. Around this location, you should feel it. It should be on the front of your oil filter housing cap. It's going to be an eTorx E10. It's going to be one of the more annoying bolts to reach. The final bolt will be another one right here. It should be just south of the first bolt you removed for the intake pipe. With that removed, you should be able to give this a pull and it should come right out. Once you have your charge pipe off, the next thing you'll want to do is get your serpentine belt off. The tensioner pulley is the one directly right of your main crank pulley. And here I've got a 14 on a extended breaker bar. I'm just gonna socket that on and then push counterclockwise, and I should be able to just dislodge the belt. Having the belt out of the way will give you much better access to your thermostat bolts, as well as the fittings themselves. To get your thermostat off, first you'll want to undo your thermostat connector here. I like to put a piece of tape on it just so I don't forget to plug things back in. The same with this connector here that we undid earlier. And once that's out, you want to disconnect your upper radiator hose right here, this little piece that goes to the top driver side of your radiator. And you're going to lose a lot more coolant than I have during this step because I've already undone this. But it goes in this orientation with 47 or 41A towards your radiator. Next, I'm going to undo the 3 bolts here, here, and behind here that hold the thermostat on, as well as the bolt here that holds it to the oil filter housing. You'll want to snip the cable tie here that holds your wastegate actuator vacuum line in place, and then just wiggle your thermostat housing. The whole thing is one module until it comes out. And you can maneuver your vacuum line around it and expect to lose more coolant here. I'm losing nothing because I've already taken this off. And then at this point, if removing this idler pulley gives you better access, then it's okay to do so. But in most cases, you should be able to cut at the turbocharger coolant lines from this angle with a knife. I'm going to demonstrate this using a line set that's already been removed from the car for better view. This is just a driver's side coolant line, and this bolt is the one that's notoriously difficult to reach. It's on the firewall side, and you've got probably an inch, and they have to overlap each other, and that's what we're trying to avoid touching, because this side never fails. It's always this plastic fitting here. This tends to snap off in the block. I have a way of getting them out that I'll show you in a bit, but what we want to do, and pretend this is in the car, but you want to take a knife and you want to cut away at this section of the plastic line here, because this is the section we're going to replace. And what you want to do is you want to slice away at it until you've got about this much aluminum showing, and you can just pry it off. So with your lines cut off, now you'll want to carefully pry these lines out with, I like to use a flathead screwdriver, but wiggle them first just to make sure they're not completely stuck. But just pry them out very, very carefully like that, like so. And this is going to look so easy compared to yours because I've already had them out. Unless your lines are very new, they're going to take a bit of effort to get out. So you're removing your OEM fittings that were leaking, and this happens. It breaks inside the water pump. What do? It tends to break, from my experience, right here. So you'll have your first O-ring groove, the rib, the ridge, and then a second O-ring groove. And where the second O-ring groove transitions into the remainder of the boss's body, that line there, that stress riser, is right where it breaks. And what happens is you'll have this left in the water pump, an O-ring, then a ridge, then you'll have a second O-ring left in the water pump, as you can see here. So the first step you want to do is remove this O-ring. And I've got just a dental pick. You can use either plastic or metal. If you're using metal, be careful not to scratch the bore. But I'm just going to pick this out. Remove the O-ring. Now that that's out, the first method I'm going to show you involves using a 5/16 or similar size lag bolt. You want it sized so that it doesn't fit, but it's close enough where you can kind of get threads to start and have it bite. From my experience, when these are stuck in there, they'll be pretty tight. So usually you will be able to just get your 5/16 on there and then take a wrench, and you should be able to get that thread started, at least a thread or two. And hopefully the thing doesn't start turning on you. You don't want to push down because that could shove it into the water pump, which makes it a much bigger headache. But you want it to catch just enough where you can take a pry tool. This is just one of those body panel clip pry tools, but it comes in handy here because it'll fit right between the threads. And I've got that one out. So the second method you can try if this breaks in there is we're once again going to start by removing this top O-ring. We always want to get that out because that just adds a ton of resistance when we're trying to pull it out. But once you get that out, you can try an M8 tap. Similarly, you can probably use a 5/16 if you have one of those lying around. I just have this M8 here. But you can see the fitting is turning with the tap. That's not actually what we want. And I'm pushing down lightly on it, firmly, but not hard because I don't want to push it down through. And now I can try to remove it. So as you can see, that method hasn't worked this time. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. But I'm just going to move on to my third method here. And this is the method that takes a little more work, but I feel like works the best in this kind of scenario where your other methods have failed. What I've got here is a homemade little, kind of like a bearing extractor, like a blind hole bearing extractor, except I've got a bolt that by itself would fit right through. Uh-oh. I've got that stuck in there. By itself would fit into that bore and not bite on anything. I've drilled a hole straight through it, and then I've cut a slot with a hacksaw. You can Dremel it too. Cut a slot along the length of it. And if I would just stop dropping things. Here I've got a second smaller screw. I think this is an M3 and this is a quarter 20. But the head of it will fit right through. And this is a countersunk flathead screw that I've slimmed down the head with a grinder, with a sander, and it'll fit right through. But we're gonna slide it through backwards so that the taper on the head is on this end. And then on the head of the big bolt, I've ground a flat that'll fit, a set of flats that'll fit a 10 millimeter, but actually that's not needed in this case because I've also made a little slot on the tip of the 3 millimeter screw here that is meant to, actually that's a 4 millimeter screw, my bad. But I have a nut here that I'm going to thread on, and I'm just going to drop this somewhere midway into the bore, like that. And then I'm going to take my wrench and hold this little nut that I've threaded onto the end of it. And then I'm going to turn the center small screw counterclockwise, which is essentially the same thing as me tightening on this nut. But I'm gonna turn these, probably want to turn on this in this case. I've just lightly tightened it, and I should just be able to, so what it does is it pulls the head into the split of the large bolt, and it will flare it out. And the threads on the quarter 20 will catch onto the inner diameter of the fitting. And we should just be able to pull it out like that. You can see where it's biting. In a pinch, I think you could do this with a blind hole bearing extractor set if you have one of those. But this method with the bolt gives you a lot more surfaces where it's biting into the soft plastic. Usually with the blind hole bearing extractor set, you only have one little flare on the end of it, which may work, may not work. The last way you can do it, the most work is you can remove your water pump, and then you'll be able to stick a tool in there, some kind of a screwdriver or a pick. You can push on it. You want to take your replacement hose. If you're buying these from me, they'll come pre-molded to shape and cut to length like this. But I'll have a link in the description for the 5/16 inch ID heater hose that you can use in its stead. But you want to cut it to the right length, and then you'll want to take a knife on your new replacement line, treating this as the new one. And you'll want to very carefully, and you'll have to be extra careful during this step to not nick the plastic, as this barb feature is much more sensitive to damage than the aluminum there. You want to remove just the plastic and the rubber inside while keeping your plastic barb damage free. And with that, it went on like that. so you'll want to put it on. And wetting this with coolant or just water helps tremendously, but usually you can just push them on. And you want to get it so that it bottoms out like that. And then you want to take a constant tension clamp. This type, not the type with the worm screw, that tends to over compress, and that will cause this to crack quicker. Not immediately, but it will tend to fail quicker if you use the wrong type of clamp. And just set it on there. I like to set them so that this faces out. It will not hit the belt. The belt will sit further outboard of it, but you won't run into any parts of the water pump either when it's facing this direction. So next, I'm going to take my wetted line and I'm going to slide it over the exposed aluminum remnant of the fitting of the line. And this is going to take a little bit of effort. I'm going to reposition my clamp. You'll want to fit your replacement hoses so that they bottom out or come very close to bottoming out against the lip on the aluminum line like shown. Then you're going to move your hose clamp to where they're about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch from the ends of the hoses like in the picture. Now with all three of these lines connected and the hose clamps fastened in place, I'm going to wet these with a little bit of coolant. Then insert them and fully seat them. And then reinstall my fastening bolts. And you'll want to make sure these are as seated as you can get them before attempting to install the bolt. We want to avoid pulling these into place, especially we want to avoid pulling them in with the bolt and tab, especially if you're using the plastic OEM or aftermarket ones instead of these aluminum ones. These you'll get away with a little more. The plastic ones, you really want to avoid that. Torque spec is 9 Newton meters. You can see this one's not fully in yet. If you made it to this point, the rest is all reassembly. If you're familiar with your engine, feel free to get cracking at it. Otherwise, feel free to stick around. For both installation purposes and to get a better shot, I removed this idler pulley from the oil filter housing right here. And now I'm going to put this back. But we are on the final leg. I've now dipped my thermostat, the O-ring, in some coolant just to wet it and lubricate it as I maneuver it back into place. So through the wastegate actuator vacuum line and into place here. wiggle that, walk it into place. I'm going to start these threads. You'll want to tighten these bolts in the order shown here, with the 3 flange bolts first, then the additional bolt that secures it to your oil filter housing in order to compress the gasket properly. Now's a good chance to zip tie your vacuum line back in place, as well as reconnect your thermostat. The next step will be to reinstall your upper radiator hose, as this gets more difficult once accessing the clips gets more difficult if you install your charge pipes first. On this line here, this fitting, you want to make sure that you really push it all the way in, because your metal flange, when it's flush with the outermost edge of your thermostat housing, is not actually fully seated. You'll see a little dimple here, and let me get a close-up photo of this, but you want to push it all the way in. Next, you'll want to get your serpentine belt back on, as this becomes unnecessarily difficult once the intake pipe is installed. Our next step, once that's in, is to reinstall our driver's side charge pipes. And that's going to be this hose clamp, this bolt here with the Torx T30, and this bolt here with the E10. I'm just going to insert them, feel it fully seat. With that in, the next step is to reinstall our intake pipes. I'm going to position this hose clamp in a spot where I can access it from where I removed it from. So I just lightly tighten down on that. I can see that at this angle, I'll be able to get at it. This rubber boot lives over the inlet of your turbocharger, and what happens is it's got a lip and it catches on the outside of your turbo, and you want to push it over until it fully seats. A lot of times it's not possible to get it to fully make contact there just because of the axis and the location, but you do not want it to sit like this. You want it to at least sit where you have less than 1/8 of an inch of gap here. Ideally, it seats fully. But you can remove these and clean these, because these will directly influence any dirt on this has a good chance of going into your turbocharger, and you don't want that. I'm just going to snake this down, and this is loose. Position it so that it slots over that rubber boot. Once you have your lower inlet hose clamp connected, the rest is real simple. I'm just going to put this on. Reinstall our air box. Make sure this PCV fitting hose is in place. Just going to drop that in. I'm going to make sure we don't catch our vacuum line. Don't forget this connector here. Intake duct. Engine cover. Engine cover. Once that's all done, you just want to fill up coolant, start the engine, observe, top off as it bleeds through and air comes out. Then you'll want to take a quick test drive around. Once the engine's warm, run it through its rev ranges, and remember to bring coolant with you on your test drive, as you'll likely, as air bleeds through, you'll have to top it up on the road.